We know that Kenyan agriculture is largely rain-fed, but more than 80% is arid and semi-arid with very little rainfall. Droughts have become very frequent, especially in recent times due to climate change, and so there is unpredictability and reduced food production. Maize is a very important food crop which is relied upon by about 96% of Kenyans. It contributes significantly to food and income security. It also accounts for 9 to 18% of total household expenditures. 75% of total maize production is by small-scale farmers. There has, however, been a decline over the years in maize production and also productivity. The government has taken note of this and has put in place various programs to enhance not only production of maize, but all other crops, and I believe livestock. So there is need for urgent and radical action to reduce pressure on maize consumption, trends, and food dietary practices by encouraging blending of maize flour with largely underutilized rich flours like millets, the sorghums, the cassava, and others. So blending of flours is one of the interventions to increase food security under the Big Four agenda. So the benefits of blending, I think we all know. There is a reduction in maize consumed. There is going to be improved in nutrition. There will be food and income security, especially in the arid and semi-arid lands where most of these crops, alternative cereals, are produced.
As much as the population increase is good for sustained labor provision, it is also necessary that population has to be sustained through a healthy food or through good health provisions. Even as we cry about a drought, climate change, and what have you, we must also, the climate of our minds must also change. And I challenge each one of you here, we must all promote maize flour blending.
One of the dangers in cereal-based diets is that, you get the energy, the calories, but some of these cereals are deficient in key micronutrients, and even those that have some of the micronutrients, they have other factors that affect absorption of those micronutrients. The other one could be also disease condition, such that our bodies are not able to absorb the micronutrients in the food. And then that one now results to somebody suffering from micronutrient deficiency. At the stage of the newborn, the babies, the children, micronutrient deficiency leads to low birth weight. And what happens when you have low birth weight, that children may not grow to its potential. And because of those deficiencies, there's high mortality rates and impaired mental development. Impaired mental development means a lot to our economic development, because it means that that person, when that child, when they grow to maturity, then they will be below their potential in mental faculties. Then, when you look at the child, the consequences is stunting. As a country, nationwide, if you take 100 children, 26 children are stunted. Meaning those 26 children in 100 will never realize their potential. And it's good we are here, as professionals, because we will be judged by generations if we don't make good decisions that will ensure food and nutrition security.
For us to be able to put this so that the private sector is able to run with. What will be the appropriate price that will be able to bring down the price of cassava to be uptaken by the industry, so that now the factories are able to take it up for blending. So the business case is hinging on these factors, that we are going to work around the factors that we are able to run around, and we are able to manage that the prices are able to come down.
Farm Concern is agri-market development agency. We focus on market development. Now, when we are talking about blending of flours, it is going to be required to be absorbed at consumer level. Then Farm Concern and other organizations that focus on consumer awareness and other market development strategies then need to come in. So as Farm Concern, our areas of specialization, before we begin any work, we look at value chain analysis. We want to do a value chain analysis to understand, is it profitable for farmers or smallholders to be involved in that enterprise? We have invited private sector into this forum. For private sector, it has to be economies of scale. It has to be business. So for the farmers, then that's the aspect. We want to look at smallholder commercialization. We are looking at 4 value chains that we have highly spoken about this morning. We are looking at sorghum, we are looking at millet, we are looking at maize, at cassava. How do we bring these commodities to scale to be able to be absorbed, to be able to form a part of the process of the of flour blending? Then, as an organization, we look at market access. When the farmers have produced this cassava, where does it go? So those are really the 3 key areas in which we focus on, so that we are not just telling the farmers, produce these or get into this value chain, and then there is no benefit for them.
When we come to the issue at hand, whereby we are talking of flour blending, we currently have a number of standards that are related to this blending thing. And we have the main one, which is the composite flour specification. And then we have the other standards, which are now for the flours that are going to be used for the blending. We have the cassava flour, sorghum flour, millet flour, and the main one, that is the milled maize product specification, which is the one currently for maize, the white maize that we like so much. So we are now, we are glad to note that we have not been caught off guard. As Kenya Bureau of Standard, we are actually moving at par with the theme. So the standard talks about blending of grains, particularly with cassava. It's actually mentioned in the standard. And with regard to the issues of blending with cassava, it's mentioning about issues of hydrocyanic acid content and the minimum requirements that's supposed to be there. Because remember, at the end of the day, when we're developing standards, it's all about food safety and ensuring that the standards are ensuring high quality and at the same time promoting trade.
One thing I want to highlight, which is very often ignored, especially when you talk about maize and when you talk even about other crops, is aflatoxin. And I want to start that very quickly by asking you, do you know that this country holds the record for the largest outbreak of aflatoxicosis in the world? In 2004, 150 people died in eastern Kenya because of aflatoxicosis. Now my question was, is in there a way we could have dealt with this maize so that people can eat? That's where we come in as scientists. So I am looking at the methods of preparation that will reduce the aflatoxin in the food as eaten. And I got the answer from Mexico. They use what they call nixtamalization, alkali cooking of maize to reduce the aflatoxin as they produce masa for tortillas. And I say, can we adopt that system here? Can we add alkali, which is calcium hydroxide, not sodium hydroxide, because sodium hydroxide is associated with hypertension. Calcium hydroxide, we add it to uji, we add it to ugali, we add it to whatever other product, even githeri when it is being boiled, so that we can be able to bring down the aflatoxin.
Farmers are making commercial decisions consistently, and they don't make a maize decision. They make an integrated cropping system decision, meaning that the profitability of maize is at a question in each of these aspects. So even as we discuss the blending and availability, I think the question of its profitability is something that needs to be addressed, and largely, of course, through both productivity, increasing productivity, and ensuring that pricing is also addressed. The question we are asking is, how do we ensure that not just to bring down the cost of doing business for the farmers, but to make it reasonable enough for them to turn these commodities to profitable commodities. So sorghum, millet, as well as cassava have to be competitive so that they can then offer the best pricing for consumers at the table. Then the other issue here, for example, looking at sorghum, looking at the various prices, and then who are the losers, who are the winners along the value chain, and how do we make sure that it becomes a fair game for all the players. The other questions is, how do we unlock then sustainable value chain-wide demand? And I think we are saying it's now from workshops. We have had lots of workshops, and I think one of the issues that we are all in agreement is everyone who has presented here has a story of some efforts. But these efforts are fragmented and haven't been concerted. And we are glad that through the State Department of Agriculture, now we can concert these efforts and ensure that all these efforts, what each of the presenters did was to actually give very top line, very top level findings. But in real sense, this is a lot of information, a lot of data that is available in this room. But how do we consolidate it and now get it into implementation? How do you also ensure that the consumers appreciate and understand sufficiently that this is a solution for them, and they can now demand that they want the flour blended, even as we do the implementation, so that it is not just a push, is that we actually having a pull by the consumer, because we will then ensure that there's an image building of sorghum, there is an image building of millet and cassava, so that as we blend, we make sure that the commodity is acceptable in terms of how we branding that commodity. And of course, looking at the profitability and looking at continuous private sector engagement. And so cost drivers for us is critical to just make sure that we monitor them, because after all these efforts, then profitability is what is going to make sure that this food is available at the urban and the rural levels, as well as the peri-urban.
The discussion that we are having today is very important. It's very important because it's coming at the right moment when the government is actually addressing the issue of food security as a flagship project for this government. So I think we are in the right place, we are at the right moment to really discuss about food security.
So first of all, as we were thinking through reducing pressure on maize, we thought it would be very unfair to leave wheat behind, because statistics show that wheat production has been declining at an alarming rate, and we know the reasons. Subdivision of land, over-reliance on imports has continued to even increase. Also, we don't want just to focus on cereal blends. We can introduce amaranth, grain amaranth, and possibly soya, because they are easy to grow, and soya is an industrial product that can salvage our livestock industry, can produce the oil, vegetable oil, as well as fortify our flour with necessary amino acids that are lacking in other pulses. So that was the addition. We thought we could easily add those ones. Now, we are thinking that the thematic working groups we had today should be sustained, and also bringing in what we were just, the suggestion that we can collapse them to 4. But we were thinking that we could come up with a detailed implementation framework, stroke log frame, and identify as well and invite key organizations that you think can add value to that thematic group. And we're giving these groups 2 weeks between 3rd and 13th April, maybe to have between 1 to 2 meetings to concretize specific objectives that can achieve that thematic group, thematic area. After we have come up with the possible implementation plan of key specific objectives, we can have a validation workshop maybe by 18th of April, and then consolidate all the thematic areas into a Kenya flower blending strategy. We thought the outcome may actually be a strategy, isn't it? Because a strategy is a plan of action. And we want to move from just talking to action. So we think that after the groups have met twice and come up with some framework, maybe just focusing on the log frame, we can then consolidate the findings into that strategy by 18th of May. We give ourselves a month from 18th April to 18th of May, whereby we may get key representatives from key institutions that can think through, possibly for a week or more, to come up with a final strategy that can be implementable. After that, zero draft of that strategy comes out, maybe in a month's time, between April and May. We can then have a final validation workshop, which should be communicated, and hopefully we can be able to launch a national flower blending strategy, and of course a national flower blending consortium, who may be the oversight body to ensure that that strategy is implemented.